So, hi everyone. I'm Nirit. I'm the one doing really weird things with moss plants. And in this talk, I'm going to take you into a completely different scope and topic than we heard before, and maybe what we will hear after. But maybe, hopefully, that would give you another angle about games, playful interactions. So I'm going to talk about playing with living systems and harnessing playful behaviors to provoke thought about human and non-human beings and relationships. So the thing about living system is that they're actually quite strongly tied with games and with digital interactions. So researchers and also big companies have been investing and seeking ways to create compelling experiences. They've been developing complex and sophisticated models to mimic behaviors of natural systems, of natural beings, to try to create convincing environments. So from basic implementation of physical qualities to simple pixels, like in this really fun game called Powder Game, to developing really sophisticated hyperreal assets and environment using things like Unreal Engine and so forth. But a less familiar approach to try and achieve this sense of aliveness led some researchers to explore the integration of living organisms, such as microorganisms, fungi, plants, and animals into games and HCI. One justification for that was that living systems have this quality of unpredictability and they add variability. So for example, in this game, in this kind of experiment, the ghosts that we know from the known Pac-Man game were controlled by the movement and behavior of living crickets that were placed in a maze and monitored. So of course, the ghosts in that case moved and replaced really unpredictably. And another explanation or benefit that these integrations could have, as Raphael Kim showed in his game called Mold Rush, is that there's a sense of anticipation and fascination. So he used mold bacteria in this strategic game, and he tested how players received this, comparing to a digital version. And players actually were much more excited and fascinated, even though they had to wait 24 hours before they can see the response to their actions in the game. But however, as we learned yesterday from many of the talks, AI and machine learning revolutionized image synthesis and behavior models. So this enables game developers and designers to create much more dynamic interactions and lifelike scenes, which also create this fascination and exciting experiences. For example, Dominic talked yesterday about this model giving generative agents much more, human-like behaviors, more convincing behaviors. And for example, in this online game, people can garden their virtual cloud garden, and it will grow and it will develop and transform over time, which might give the same sense of anticipation. So maybe we don't actually need to integrate living species into games. Maybe that's enough. But I think there is still room to inquire how these things, how these developments affect our understanding of the world and how those interactions impact people and their perception of the real living worlds. So what if, for example, artificial life will become a substitute to real living experiences. If we think about children's play, for example, is there value or maybe any certain emotional aspect tied with biological life or mortality that we need to preserve? One concern is reflected through what Pyle called the extinction of experience, the process of alienating ourselves from natural environments. And he claimed that if we don't interact directly with living beings, then we appreciate them less, we understand them less. And I mean, this book here shows that we actually don't know how to take care of our plants, how to not kill plants. How many of you ever killed a plant or like the plant died under your supervision? Yeah, I expected that. So studies show that more than 70% of plant owners kill at least 2 plants per year. So, and that wasn't always the case. Like in history, people would actually live in a more kind of caring way with their environments. So, yeah, and houseplants is my favorite topic, so I will delve into it a bit more now. But yeah, and you know, we can also enjoy virtual plants. So again, I'm asking why does it all matter? But of course it does matter because our planet is dying, and that is because we don't know how to care for living systems. So, other than actually practicing care, like in real life and growing plants or gardens or whatever, maybe there are some ways that we can integrate the two worlds together, the non-human living world with the digital worlds that we are seeing. And I want to explore with you some playful interactions and technological tools that may help make people more curious about living beings and non-humans. So in the following slides, I will show some projects that inspired me or made me ask some questions about these kind of integrations. So some earlier works were trying to translate, as you know, I mean, we said before, people do not really know how to care for plants. They don't understand plant signals. So a really kind of obvious go-to was to try and translate plant into conversations. So the plant would call us. I don't know how many of you remember that a phone used to look like this, but that was just for the publication. They actually did this research much later. The plant would call us when we need to water it. And there was another project trying to translate conversation sentiments into caring for plants. But these examples don't actually recognize or acknowledge the actual plant's signals. It kind of acknowledges the plant's environment. And another 2 examples, which are a bit weird, are these examples where researchers and designers try to turn plants into ambient displays or interfaces. And that is interesting and might be quite exciting at times, but it also kind of objectifies the plant. And eventually, a lot of audiences and participants felt a bit uneasy about that, a bit uncanny about that. But this work, for example, I find it really interesting. So in this work, the designers used the electrical signals of plants, which apparently can sense the presence and movement of other beings around them. So they use the electrical signals that plants make when they sense something moving close to them into sound waves and music, and then created this kind of performative interaction where a dancer dances close to the plants that is reflected through the plant signals and impacts the music and the sound, and then impacts the dancer's movement, again, like in a nice feedback loop. And that was also, there was another version open to audiences to try themselves. Video is not working. And in this work, the same kind of method was used, but to send those signals into a kind of a wearable where people would feel vibrations when they come closer to plants. And the plants were, again, emitting these signals translated into vibrations. Another really interesting project was like a more poetic or maybe more metaphorical project where the designer thought, well, plants have a different experience of the world, and we can try and understand their experience in a different way. So she designed devices that allowed people to taste light. So she said, well, plants eat light, they consume light. And she created this device that you put on your tongue, and when light hits it, you get those vibrations which make you feel like there's a taste in your mouth. There were other things like sensing wind and things like that. And this work by Spela Petrick, he is an artist and a researcher who's doing a lot of works with plants for many years. So in this work, she created a play of catch the ball between a climbing plant and an AI-driven robot. So the plant, that ran for like months and months, right? So it was a very, very slow catch play, but these kind of plants, they seek for something to hang on to. So the robot would move those balls really slowly and then try to predict where the plant is growing towards and then change the height or the direction of the balls, and then the plant would respond to that and so on. So that's another kind of feedback loop where she tried to position the plant as an agent in a game in some sort of way. Yeah, and those hybrid interactions, they can also serve as research probes, as social or ecological probes. So for example, in this work called the Telegarden, multiple players could interact through a website with a robot that took care of a garden. So they would give instructions to the robot, and it would plant seeds and water the plants and so on. But as more and more people joined this, it became quite a mess, and people started plunking out other people's plants, and everything just turned into a mess. But it was a really interesting research tool for the group that used it, and also it generated a lot of really interesting discussions in the online forum about technology, gardening, and natural ecosystems. And this is another wild project called Playing with Pigs, which was originally created to help prevent pigs in the farm from getting bored. And then, when pigs get bored, they also become violent. So this was a project that was supposed to help farmers, but eventually it was quite controversial. But what was really interesting about it is that when people played with the pigs, so people could, like you can see here, they moved a digital ball and the pigs would then touch it and move it again. So people were really fascinated by the cognitive abilities of the pigs, and playing with them created this emotional response that people were not expecting, and then they thought differently about those pigs. And that elicited, of course, some moral questions for the people. Okay, 1 minute. Yes. So just gonna say quickly, this is another really interesting project called the Tartiguchi, inspired by the Tamagotchi game, where you take care of a digital tardigrade, but inside this tiny box, there's an actual water bear tardigrade creature, a very tiny one that we cannot perceive in real life. And when you care for the digital one, then the living one is also getting food. And again, this is posing some really interesting questions like, who do we care about more? The digital, animated, cute one that we can see and interact with, or the actual living, tiny one that we can never see? And it brings me to what I do. So this is my recent study, the Moss Terrarium probe. So I created this Moss terrarium that is equipped with sensors and a camera, and I put it into 12 households. And I monitored and it had this motion sensor. So each time people interacted with it, it initiated a short recording. And then I interviewed people. They had it for 2 weeks. So I was trying to investigate how people take care of plants on a daily basis. So not just relying on assumptions, but I really wanted to know what kind of factors and conditions impact their sense of care, their sense of concern towards the plant. And what I found, writing the paper on this right now, what I found is that it's not about age and it's not about necessarily experience. It's more about actually the social and family dynamics around the care for the plants, which was a surprising finding for me. But that means that in my next interventions and when I try to design playful interactions or games, I might consider this social effect or the interfamily dynamics or the household dynamics when trying to design something to basically shape a culture of care. This is just other things that I'm exploring, some of them in collaboration with Erin Robinson, who is also part of iGGi. So we're testing all kinds of translations and augmentations for plants and their responses. And thank you. This is just a list of references. Thank you.
So I'm going to throw this again. Any questions? So,
Hello. Uh, so this is about the works that transform like frequencies of light to sound or vice versa. How do you make sure that the mapping makes sense? Like I, as a computer scientist, someone could get an image and make a random mapping and transform it to a sound, but that doesn't mean it's gonna sound well. How do you make sure that makes sense for plants or any other?
Yeah, so I understand your question. I mean, it's not my work, so I don't know exactly what they did to make sure about that. But I think their main idea was not particularly the accuracy of it, but more to show people that plants do sense things. So there, I think the sensors are becoming more and more sophisticated over time. But how exactly they mapped it and how they translated the sound, that's kind of an aesthetic and creative way of interpreting it, I guess. Because yeah, obviously we cannot hear what kind of sound the plants make.
okay.
Hi, very interesting talk. Concerning both your research and then kind of connecting it to the Tardigachi
Yeah.
experiment, how do you feel about, because you were talking about how you were going to relate the stuff that you found in your research to like building those kind of like environment narratives for caring environments, and then how you made the comment about with the Tardigachi with those very tiny organisms and how people were caring for them in the sense of looking at them as a digital character. How do you feel like that relates, because naturally in these different home environments, they still see like the plants themselves or like the moss, and then there's been research about how plants actually do communicate with each other and how they kind of have like these kind of communities, and like some of them even have sort of like friends with each other. So how do you feel like that can relate to what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so I mean, the worlds of plants, their signals, and the way that they sense the world or signal the world is really fascinating and wide, and there are different ways to explore that, and it becomes a bit more prevalent that people explore that from different fields. So for me, I think I'm working with moss plants, which are also quite tiny, that in a way that we cannot see the responses, but they do respond quite fast. So within a minute, you could see them move if you use the right tools, like augmentation tools or microscopes. And I'm thinking about that more than about the relationship between plants, because that's quite hard to, you need really deep lab tools to investigate that. But the moss is, I see the opportunity there because quite easily I can use this as a plant that really responds fast enough for us to see. And then while using digital tools or augmentation tools, I can actually amplify its responses.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really good. Any more? Okay, so I'll go you next.
Hey, thanks, Nirit. That's a very interesting area. I was just curious about like how do you see this connecting to or say contributing to games and game design?
Yes, it's a good question because not all of my examples were directly related to games. Some of them are more of an artistic interactions or human-computer interactions. But I think elements in those interactions are really important for the game design and development world. So some things about creating curiosity, creating engagement, translating types of information on or data to different kind of aesthetics and models like sound and visual and responses. And also these are tools that can help us research better people's responses. So I think that's a really interesting connection to make.
Time for one more. Here you go.
Just kidding. I haven't asked a question because I'm so frightened of catching this or not catching it. Thank you very much. That's really fascinating. I just wondered about the moss terranium probes, and you said I can't remember how many people you gave it to. I just wondered because you asked us at the start of the talk how many of us had killed plants.
Yeah.
What experience would the participants have? Like, were they plant lovers to begin with, or did they have a similar experience to most of us in the room, perhaps?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I was trying to make sure that the participants are not particularly plant lovers or like really experienced with plants, although some of them were. I had 12 households, and each household had both people who were more enthusiastic and people who were less, or people living alone and didn't have much experience. But at the end, it kind of split between people who were very concerned about this terrarium and tried their best way to keep it watered on time, or examine if it needs anything, coming up with creative solution for challenges, and the other half which were that just okay, well, it just didn't survive, or I couldn't just control it. And so it kind of splits, and I can